Okay, we are at the bottom of the hour, so let's respect all of our time. And again, appreciate everybody for joining us today. You're here for the fiscal outlook for the coming year with Peter Birdsall, Vince Bustamante, and Krista Thomsen. Next slide. My name is Aaron Heinzman. I have the honor of taking care of California for Corwin. I'm the Senior Professional Learning Advisor in California. There's my contact information. We'll also repeat it at the end. And when you actually receive the link for this recorded webinar, you can access that information then. The next slide, please. Some Zoom keeping reminders. Chat box, please utilize the chat box with any sort of questions. If some reason a question comes to you after this live webinar, please reach out to me and I'll be happy to connect with you. So just a reminder, this is being recorded and we will be sharing this on our Corwin channel. You'll receive a certificate of attendance via email sometime later this week. Also, yeah, just real quick, the info at k12.corwin.com, just in case it goes to your spam. Most of the time it gets to your normal email box, but just in case. So next slide, please. A couple of Corwin offers lots of different webinars, free webinars. There's another one coming up on December 19th. And then this series, as far as our state budget for schools in California, this is part 2 of 6 in this series. We did this last year as well. And this, again, this is number 2 this year. Our next one is on January 19th. The best slide. Let me just share a little bit about our folks today, Peter, Vince, and Krista, a little bit about who they are. Peter is the Executive Director of the Professional Learning Coalition. His experience in state education policies includes serving as a legislative advocate for numerous California school districts, county offices, and professional associations. Vince is an instructional coach, curriculum content developer, and co-author of 2 best-selling books with Corwin Press, Career Teaching by Design and the Assessment Playbook for Distance and Blended Learning. Vince is passionate about implementation, assessment, and creating classroom environments that foster deep learning experiences where teachers understand and evaluate their impact. He specializes in working with teachers, leadership teams, schools, and school districts as they seek to implement high-impact strategies and systems for school improvement. Krista has been an educator for 25 years. She has served as an English teacher, instructional coach, site principal, and school board trustee in Texas, North Carolina, Minnesota, and California. She is currently in her 7th year at the Lancaster School District as Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment. And at this point in time, I think we're going to pass it over to Peter.
Great. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate the opportunity to share some perspective about what to expect for the coming fiscal year. Key thing about this first slide is my email address. I'm going to go pretty quickly through these topics, so we will have a chance for questions at the end, but if there's something else, please email me if I can provide more information. Next, please. My comments today are based on a report by the Legislative Analyst Office. That's what LAO stands for in this slide. When in every November, they release what's called the Fiscal Outlook for the coming fiscal year. It's really sort of the kickoff of the state budget season. So we'll be talking about the 4 items that are identified here, starting with the next one. Move the slide. With the cost of living adjustment, I'd say when the report came out in November, the thing that you saw in the papers was a projection of a $26 billion deficit in the state budget. But for K-12 education, the big news was a projected cost of living adjustment, COLA, of 8.73%. First of all, that's an estimate. The number will change. It's based on a formula where the exact number will be known in April. But this is a solid estimate. So the key point is it's going to be a big number. Somewhere over 8%, significant cost of living adjustment. The other key points were the analyst estimates that that'll cost $7.6 billion. $7.9 billion, and we have 7.6 available. Well, Prop 98 is K-12 education and community colleges are funded in California under the constitutional requirement that we refer to as Proposition 98. That's over $100 billion. So a difference of 300 million between 7.9, 7.6 is like nothing. So the key point is the COLA is fully funded. There's enough money with some very minor adjustments to pay for the entire cost of living adjustment. The other key point is that's going to take up almost all the money. So, we've heard all over the state that people are on overload. So sort of the good news of this budget presentation is we're not looking at any cuts, any mid-year cuts or significant cuts in the budget. You have a significant COLA, but probably nothing new. So you can shift your focus to implementation. And a lot of people have viewed that, frankly, as a good news budget presentation. Next, please. There are a couple of programs I wanted to slow down a little bit and highlight. One is Proposition 28. That was approved by the voters in November. The legislative analyst does a budget analysis that appears in your voter pamphlet, and they estimated that Prop 28 would generate about $1 billion a year. Well, in November, they had reduced that estimate to 941 million because it's a function of several variables: number of students, number of low-income students, the size of the state budget. But the key point is it went from $1 billion down to 940 million, so a reduction of 6%. So what it tells us is the exact dollar amount is going to be a little bit volatile. I assume that in January, the governor will give us a different estimate. The Prop 28 actually requires the governor to provide an estimate in the May revision, which obviously will be next May. But the final allocations, you see the bullet here, is not determined until January 10th of the fiscal year. So that would be January 10th of 2024. You'll know for sure how much you're getting in 2023-24. So the lesson here is, I think districts need to plan their expenditures, whatever numbers floating around, be a little bit conservative. You're allowed to, these funds are available for expenditure for 3 years. So, you might want to plan on spending 80%, 90% of the money, but give yourself a little cushion, because the thing you don't want to do is spend more than you're going to get, because there's a supplement not supplant provision that each year you need to do, it has to be on top of whatever you did the prior year. So, it's just a cautionary note as we're going to learn how Prop 28 works. The other thing we've been highlighting, I think most people have heard this already, but since it does have this supplement not supplant provision, and it's going to start in 23-24, you need to think about what you're doing this year, 22-23, because whatever that is, that forms the base that'll be used in the future. Prop $28 need to be on top of that. And so you could end up, if you've made a huge investment in art and music this year, which for students would be great, but it could put you in a little financial jeopardy as you're trying to build on that high base. Having said that, the good news is, this money is coming in some dollar amount because it's been approved by the voters, and it'll go to all school districts, county offices of education, and charter schools. Next, please. The other item that I think has gotten less attention than it deserves is the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program, ELOP. This is the initiative from the governor and legislature to fund a 9-hour day for TK through grade 6. It's a combination of the regular school year and after school, before school programs. The first key point, funded in the budget at $4 billion. The governor is very committed to this. There's enough money in the budget to pay for it, so it's not in jeopardy. Having said that, the legislative analyst in their report did raise a question about, anecdotally, they're hearing a lot of districts are having trouble implementing it, and or some of the parents and students don't want to participate in a 9-hour day, or can't participate in a 9-hour day. So the analyst has raised the question of should the exact quote is, the state could improve the program and reduce costs by allocating funding based on actual participation instead of attendance. So basically that's a change in the funding formula, potential change in the funding formula. We've talked to legislative staff and they are hearing the same thing. I think there is going to be discussion this coming year about trying to clarify the implementation requirements and how it's held accountable. And what that means for those of you that may be having trouble implementing it or not, don't feel that there's the same tremendous need for it, that the funding for that could change. So for the Professional Learning Coalition, Aaron indicated I'm the executive director of that, this is going to be an issue we're very involved in. So when you get the PowerPoint, you have my email address. If there are concerns in your district about the rules, if you will, for the Expand Learning Opportunity Program, we'd be very interested in hearing those. We're going to be involved in those discussions this coming spring. So the legislature, if there's not a new initiative coming down the road, they're going to shift more to oversight. And this is one area where I think there's a great deal of concern about, is it being implemented as intended? So again, it's no lack of support. It's just what are the rules going to be? Finally, next slide. So the real pressure in the budget, hopefully for most of you, this has been a good news K-12 education perspective for a presentation. The pressure in the budget, the headlines in the newspapers of a $25 billion shortfall is entirely on the non-Prop 98 side of the budget. So that is 46% we show here of the non-Prop 98 budget is health and human services, 14% is higher ed, meaning UC and CSU. So that's where the pressure is going to be. So that is a cause for, obviously, we're all citizens of California, we have families, so it's of interest that way. But also, if you're working on community schools, mental health, any of the initiatives that are trying to address the whole child and relying on what's going on with health and human services or dual enrollment, there are implications outside of the budget. So that will be a important topic in the legislature and for all of us in advocacy for the next few months. Finally, I think the budget itself, this is based, as I said, on the legislative analyst report. The governor's budget comes out on January 10th. Aaron noted that we're going to do another webinar on January 19th. So that will reflect the actual recommendations from the governor's budget. And that in turn will trigger the legislative hearings that I was just referencing. So with that, you can tell the sort of general theme of this perspective on the fiscal outlook for 23-24 is that for K-12 education, it's pretty stable, and that allows us to shift to implementation rather than implementing some new initiative. And so I'm really thrilled that we have Krista and Vince on the call today, because I get to ask them the question that I've discussed a number of districts already, but there are all kinds of answers to it, which is you still have a bunch of one-time money, the ESSER funds, the state learning recovery funds. Those have different expenditure deadlines, but some of them extend for like 5 years. So, how, if you now know that things are going to stabilize in terms of funding, no new initiatives, what recommendations do you have for how best to use those dollars when you can spread them out over 4 or 5 years to address the needs of your students and communities? So, Krista and Vince, I look forward to hearing your comments. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I will start by saying implementation is the name of the game. Right now, we are very excited about the outlook that we have in terms of our focus on standards-based instruction and getting our kids where they need to be as a result of coming out of the pandemic. We have decided we have a lot of irons in the fire for sure, but our priority is getting our kids where they need to be. And over the next 2 to 3 years, we plan to really focus in on ensuring that we're building the capacity of our teachers and our administrators and all of our staff around what does that look like. Building some standards-based report cards and using collective efficacy to maintain conversations around standards mastery learning, assessment, and feedback. And to that end, we are going to do that and are doing that through Teacher Clarity. So we're using our funds to support time with our teachers, bringing in folks to help us, professionals and experts in that arena, to help us build our capacity, build our learning, and build systems and ensure we have systems in place to sustain this work when this money runs out. So we are very thrilled to be working with Vince. We're also working with Dave Nagel on our PLC Plus work and standards-based grading work, but Vince is here. He's almost living with us these days, working with about 9 of our schools right now on the implementation of Teacher Clarity. And we're very blessed to have site and district instructional coaches to help with the implementation of this work long-term. And so I'll turn it over to Vince to discuss some of the work that he's doing with our sites.
Thanks, Krista. I'll just front load saying I'm currently in an elementary school music room in Lancaster. So if the Wi-Fi is a little intermittent, my apologies, but it's been such a pleasure to work with the school district. And the nice thing that about this implementation piece is that we are all kind of charting the course towards a common target. And it's a very complicated situation when you have a large district, 25 size school district, all charting towards the same target, when each school has almost a little bit of autonomy in how they're going to get there. So my help consolidate the thing about where we're going to, and then providing that as needed support intermittently. One of the things that we've been working on is stretching out my time with schools appropriately on, and so they're quarterly check-ins. And the name of the game for me with them is go slow so we. And so we're not fire hosing the professional learning at the beginning of the year and then coming back at the end of the year and saying, how did it go? We're kind of dripping, almost like an IV. We're dripping the information to the teachers over the course of the year to build that capacity. Because honestly, my role as a consultant is eventually, it's my hope that the school district doesn't need me anymore, that we've built that capacity within the district to sustain itself. And that's the way that we've been working. I'm kind of a point of contact with principals and teachers, with learning coaches who work, or instructor coach who work within each school, and then as well as our CIA department. And so I'm kind of like the runner that goes between the two and kind of figures out where we need to put those puzzle pieces. And so from an outside perspective looking in, each school is at a different spot, but we're all in the same kind of marathon towards that common goal. And so for me, the sustainability of that implementation is that when I go away, because as Krista said, I'm essentially living here part-time. I'm here 80 days of the school year. So when I'm here at the time, it's my goal when I'm no longer, I'm not a crutch to be upon, but rather just an information source to pull from.
Oh, I'm entertained that you're in the music room. I don't know if this is a question for you or Krista, but have you started planning how to incorporate the arts education, music, and operations into the programs in your schools?
That is we are starting those conversations for sure. It's a matter of what organizations can we work with to bring in the music experts? What does that look like in terms of middle school? Because we're a K district. So what does that look like for us in terms of how many people can we bring in to support? What does it look like in the daily schedule? How do we give the kids the academic piece, but also make sure that we've got that music and arts piece that's vital to their education and keeps them interested and engaged, which is a huge component of keeping them in the seats, which we know that's an issue. So we are starting those conversations for sure. We're sure there's going to be a mad dash for the people who are experts in the music and arts industry. So we might have to start that fight right now and getting those people recruited for our purposes.
I would just add to the irony of sitting in the music room, because I am not musically talented or inclined whatsoever. So it's very ironic that I'm sitting underneath some music notes. But for my role moving in, and Chris has talked about, the kind of outcome is standards-based grading, and the way we get there is kind of filling in those puzzle pieces at the end. And implementation piece with using the medium of teacher clarity as the kind of common language that's being used across classrooms leads all classrooms to be involved. And that's my big thing. It's not just about posting the learning intentions and the success criteria, but rather when our students move from classroom to classroom, how are we increasing that variance in the language? Is the language common about the learning? Are we all working towards common goals? Do we have models of success to get there? And then how do those teachers communicate that to the student? And how are our administrators communicating those same common language themes to the teachers? So it's a permeation outside of the classroom that seeks to involve arts education, core standards, electives, you name it. Everyone should be speaking that same language around the implementation of clarity.
Aaron, if there are other questions, I'll also ask, because I do think in legislation could be just big discussion about expanded learning. Krista, can you say a little bit how that's going in your school district? Because I think the big concern is, just so everybody's aware, the program currently is funded based on your enrollment. So you get the funding whether the students participate or not. And what the legislative analyst is raising is ideas of instead funding based on participation, which of course is, for some districts, could be dramatically different. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or comments.
We have, I'm going to do my very best to speak to this. We have a wonderful director, Jane Dana, who is in charge of the ELOP program and everything that we're doing with that. So I hope I can do her justice. She's put together an amazing setup and schedule and activities that blends beautifully with what we're doing during the school day. So the idea is to extend the school day, give them the supports that they need for sure. We've got a meal program in place for them. So she's doing amazing work in terms of getting the people here, having them stay, and give them what they need. So we're really excited. And so far, I think that our participation is very, we're looking for space. That's our biggest challenge right now is space. So I think we're well on the road, thanks to Jane and her team for sure.
The other question we've gotten, so when the analyst report came out, people were afraid that there were going to be all these cuts. So for anybody in the call, and there was an $8 billion learning emergency recovery, learning recovery emergency grant program last year, one-time funding. Both the Assembly and the Senate have made it clear they're not going to cut that. They're going to guarantee that for school districts. So you can count on that money coming. That's available to you. It's one-time funding, but it's available through 27-28. So do you have any comments on, one of the challenges is you have this need right now, but you also want to sustain it as long as you can. So how are you addressing that dilemma?
Yeah, that goes very much to what we're saying in terms of building our systems, because we know long-term we've got to have systems in place to sustain this work. This is not a fly-by trend. This is something that we want to build the capacity of our people to carry on long term. So that's why I really appreciate the work that Vince and Dave are doing in the district to build that capacity slow and steady. This is not, we're not bringing them in for one or two times. This is a multi-year, throughout the year project here to get us where we need to be with it. We have outcomes and goals for each year in terms of where we want to be with this implementation, and getting, we have 21, 22 schools that need to get on board with this. And so we're doing it, chunking it a little bit at a time, so that when that money does run out, we have the capacity within our system through instructional coaches, administrators, staff, and teachers to sustain that long term. We'll have pieces in place, time built into the day, because we do have some of those scheduling structures in place that we can use that time to bring in new people, new teachers, new administrators, get them up to speed on the way that we do things. But that can't be done without the work that Vince and Dave and others are doing. So Vince, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, the only thing I would add for those of you who are, thinking about how we can use the funding for this kind of implementation process is that the first third of the implementation process is just getting everyone to almost convince themselves that this is not going away, because I feel like traditional professional learning teachers are very used to subscribing to that one and done. And when the energy fizzles out, we move to something different. And that was probably the greatest challenge at the early onset, was convincing not just teachers, teaching staff who already have enough on their plate, but also administrators that this is kind of the avenue that we're going. This is the direction we're going, and it's not going away. So we need to kind of sustain that, and we're going to sustain it by incrementally moving forward. So I mentioned I'm here in Lancaster, which may appear kind of awkward in the sense that like this is their last week of school before holiday break, but there's a rhyme and a reason why I'm here. And I'm in these schools because last year when I was working in certain schools, there was a larger gap. So I showed up. My last session with them was pre-Thanksgiving, and then my follow-up session was after the new year. And there was a big kind of breakdown in that consistency, because we got in what I call the holiday sandwich, when we're between Thanksgiving and holiday break, that everything else takes precedence. And so being here, we're not moving the needle forward in terms of new learning, but rather just maintaining that consistency. So it's a reminder that this isn't going away. And mentally, the classrooms that I'm working in are still adjusted and attuned to the process of our implementation, and not just kind of deviating away or deviating towards kind of that traditional week before holiday break kind of letdown. We're still applying that kind of necessary pressure.
Thank you, Krista. Thank you, Vince. Thank you, Peter, for all that. For anyone that has questions, again, I know Peter shared his email. You'll also receive this recording. It also has my contact information if you haven't jotted it down yet, or if you haven't talked to me. A lot of folks I've seen on our call here have talked to me at some point in time, but I'm Aaron Heinzman at aaron.heinzman@corwin.com. So please reach out with any questions. I mean, this is our second part of the 6-part series. This will be ongoing. I mean, there's things that are consistently changing, but there's any way we can help with any of the questions that you may have about some of the things that are happening here in California. So, oh, next slide, it's already there. So that's me again. Upcoming Corwin Institutes. We have a virtual with Doug Fisher, if you haven't heard of him yet, and Sarah Ortega, coming up on January 30th. We also have our Teacher Clarity Playbook Conference, which I get the privilege of being MC at that event. I just found out about that, which I'm excited about, because I think we lead with Teacher Clarity throughout pretty much any work that we get. I get the opportunity to work with folks in California. So that'll be towards here the end of February, right after CISC. If anyone hasn't heard of that, that's the big conference in Monterey. So there's my information again, aaron.heinzman@corwin.com, my personal cell number as well. So please just reach out to me again with any sort of questions whatsoever. And again, Peter's made himself available as well to answer any questions also about some of those opportunities here at the state level. Lastly, and again, I know this time goes by super quick, our offer here for books, for Corwin books, 30% off, free shipping. One of Vince's titles, Great Teaching by Design, fantastic book. We also have the Early Childhood Education Playbook, which has just come out, and I think there's a lot of folks that have a lot of momentum behind that and how feedback works. So any of the titles on Corwin has we're revamping our website, so that'll be out the first Q1, so it's going to make the process even more seamless as far as connecting with us, as far as any of the resources that you may need or want to share with others, or maybe you are interested in a complimentary copy to review. Please just let me know and we can get that out to you. So, I thank everybody for their time. Again, I know this is the holiday season, and I just hope everyone has a safe and wonderful holiday. And again, thank you for joining us today to partake in this webinar.